Now, as we do as responsible citizens, we comply with the law, right? And part of that also means paying your taxes. And SARS has tried to implement initiatives to make it easier for us to comply, not only by introducing the likes of e-filing, but even auto assessments, which are not necessarily new. However, the practical considerations around auto assessments has led to an ongoing pressure point for many taxpayers who have been raising their frustrations about inaccuracies that have been processed on their auto assessments. To tell us more as to what the latest themes are that we as taxpayers need to be mindful of, we join on the line by Senior Tax Consultant at Tax Consulting SA, Sidney Fletcher. Sidney, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Google. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. I can imagine that you've been incredibly busy as a senior tax consultant, right? Many people saying, Sidney, help me out here. But let's start off first things first with auto assessments from SARS. As mentioned, it's not new. It's actually meant to alleviate the pressure on yourself as a tax consultant and on myself as a taxpayer to make sure that the processes are easier to manage, right? So I guess give us a backdrop and understanding of auto assessments, but of course raising some of the concerns that have now come to the fore.
As you mentioned, the auto assessments is not new for SARS. They have been implementing a version of it the last couple of years. But there's a relatively big difference between last year and this year. Because last year, when they issued and they rolled out the auto assessments, people within that target audience that they had, a targeted group, they still had to log on to the system or in any way and accept those auto assessments. The biggest change, and a change for the better this year, in my opinion, is that people don't have to accept that anymore. So once an auto assessment is raised, it's an assessment. Previously, it was an estimated assessment. So it stayed estimated. Your return remained outstanding until you accepted it.
And maybe let's emphasize that point again. As you say, it's estimated, so using past experience and your past disclosures as the basis for it.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Previously it was an estimated assessment. This year it changed with actually an original assessment. SARS views that auto assessment as an original assessment, and if you don't dispute that original assessment within 40 days, it becomes a fixed assessment, and whatever results is in that assessment, whether right or wrong, becomes a liability, a fixed liability. And that is where the biggest problem comes in this year, and that is what's causing a lot of confusion in the market.
So we're delaying in double-checking the facts and the figures within the 40 days. And just to be clear, is that 40 calendar days or business days?
Yeah, that's 40 business days.
Ah, okay. Well, I can assume SARS might say, well, that's more than enough time, but for many South Africans, that's probably where the technicalities and challenges come in. But as you say, that's how the system automatically works. But what if the discrepancies are actually very tangible, quite tangible, and actually lead to major discrepancies and disgruntlements between taxpayers as well as the taxman? How have we found, I guess, some kind of management or operations to address that?
SARS has invested a lot in their third-party data application. So that is where they rely heavily on information that they get from third parties, like your employer, investment houses, medical aids, and those financial institutions. So if any of the information is incorrect there, SARS will have your auto assessment incorrect also. If you had donations that are not, if you made donations, for example, through throughout a tax year, and the information is not pre-populated, if you have additional medical expenses, if you have want to claim against the travel allowance that you earned during the year, all chances are there that auto assessment would be incorrect. So if you haven't updated your cell phone number, your new contact details to SARS, you would not get the notification of the auto assessment in time, which means that you might miss the 40-day deadline, and that is the biggest problem that we're having at the moment now.
And that raises major concerns, right? Because I can imagine it's ongoing admin processes that need to be followed and double checking, triple checking some of this data. Does this then automatically move to a potential audit?
That is the biggest concern. An easy way to check it is to compare it with your refund or your amount that you paid the previous year. If it changes significantly, then rather contact SARS or rather log on to the e-filing system, rather edit the return and have a look at it if there's significant changes throughout the years and your financial situation haven't changed. So that is the one check that you can have, that you can make, and it's an obvious one. For the other one, we always advise to look at the income, because you might get in a situation where all your income is not declared. You understand? So all your income is not declared, and then you are getting into the risk areas for audits and additional taxes and all of that.
Got you. But it still seems a bit tedious, right? Because a lot of South Africans have been complaining, saying, well, I'm trying to come on board, I'm trying to get some assistance. So for anyone who is disgruntled at the moment with their auto assessment, where do they need to start? And I guess, as you say, number one, evaluate if you already passed the 40-day deadline, right? And then from there, how else do we seek assistance?
Yeah, if you are in the 40-day period and your assessment is incorrect, there's no alternative dispute resolution process for you there. There's no dispute resolution for you there. You can just contact SARS, log on to the system, and edit the auto assessment that was issued. If you disagree with the assessment after the 40 days, this is when it becomes tricky. Then you have to follow the processes stipulated by SARS and provide reasons as to why you didn't comply within the first 40 days, and then it becomes a big problem, and then you'll have to either contact someone or go to SARS that are proficient in the processes of dispute resolution with SARS.
Sure. It's scary, Sidney. And if someone comes to you, I can imagine it's quite a process, because SARS itself has been going through a strike action, right, that has limited its capacity to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's what makes the process even more scary is that you then have to deal with third parties. You can't just go to SARS and tell them, look, my IRP5 is wrong. You have to go to the pension fund, go through those hoops, jump through those hoops, and all of those to get the third-party data fixed. These people must send it back to SARS, and only then will your assessment be allowed to change. So it's difficult, but it all boils down to you actually being having a look at the information that SARS sends you, having a look at the auto assessment, comparing it to previous years, and make your decision there. Okay, it's more or less the same as previous years. No, there's a significant change. So let me contact Sidney, the tax consultant, to have a look for me.
I can imagine. And maybe, Sidney, I'm glad that you're raising this, because I can imagine the kind of concerns and complaints that you might be seeing from a lot of taxpayers, as you say, whether within or without that, falling within or outside of that 40-day complaint. But what are some of the typical deductions or complaints that taxpayers have? And I ask this because we're well aware that in the last 2 years, we also had the opportunity for South Africans to claim for working from home and other expenses. And others also saw their employment dynamics change, right? So has that led to new themes coming through when it comes to certain deductions?
Yeah, the last 2 years, like you said, environment change, working environments change, more people are working from home, and in true SARS fashion, they've been focusing on these type of deductions over the years. So more and more of these cases are routed for either verification or audit. So we have a stance that if you doubt whether you qualify, then rather not claim it, because it's easier to fix afterwards. If you paid SARS, then if they refunded you money that you'll have to repay to them double. So those are the type of expenses. So if the expenses, like typically your additional contributions to a retirement annuity that your employer didn't know about, you've got additional medical aid expense, out-of-pocket expenses that qualifies for an additional assessment. It's your donations, contributions, it's your home office allowances. If you are commission earners or people that are commission earners and people who are self-employed, is outside of the target market for auto assessments, but we've seen that in the market also. we've seen that happening in the market also. So, those are the type of expenses, that deductions that if you have, rather edit your auto assessment than just accepting it like that.
Sure, got you. It means that we need to be more cognizant, more vigilant, and also, as you say, just do the thing when you have the time, right? Don't consistently delay. Sidney, thank you so much for your time this evening. Really appreciate it. And I guess for those who know that their life environment or earning potential and the likes has changed, they do also need to follow up just in case they fall into the category then of being a provisional taxpayer, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Sidney, really appreciate your time this evening. That's Senior Tax Consultant at Tax Consulting SA, Sidney Fletcher, reminding us that auto assessments do need to be complied with, and make sure that that 40-day limit is actually one that you follow up with, because once you lapse from that, that's when it becomes a real schlep, literally, to follow up on the corrections that do need to be made. But if you struggle with further discrepancies and disgruntlements, do reach out to a tax consultant who might be able to direct you through the right channels.